and he worked really hard with a coach to get rid of his Russian accent when speaking in English, and then he gave up on it because people told him how much they loved his Russian accent.
But being able to use that for your advantage, like use it when you want to and not when you don't, that's effective. But people do, unfortunately, pass judgment sometimes based on dialect or just voice and all these different things that, speech impediments and things like that. You can train and work on. It's difficult, it takes a lot of effort, may not always be worth it, but it can add to your credibility as a speaker too.
I just want to say that I really do appreciate your presentation. I do have to go back to the office though. So.
No problem, thank you.
Thanks.
Any questions, please feel free to email to. So stress, like how you actually stress your words. And sometimes people are completely monotone. It's like having that articulation, but with a little bit of inflection, ups and downs. The stress, and you may have seen some, I'm drawing a blank at the moment, but it's like grandma something for dinner. Basically it ends up, oh, please remember it. Basically just based on how you stress the words, it becomes like we ate grandma for dinner or she came over. And I cannot think of the example at the moment. But there are different ways of stressing words that completely change the meaning, including they take it from a statement to a question. And so if you mean to ask a question, you're happy, right? You're happy, right? Or like there's just different ways of doing it and it can change the meaning. So just watching that, and this is also one of those things that occurs with non-native English speakers. Sometimes the stress where they stress the words changes, and so people look at you like, what? And that's why. Adjust your volume, control your rate, how fast you speak. I found this, once again, for English speakers of other languages, if they slow down, speak loud for one, because people are already trying to listen a little bit more carefully than potentially they would otherwise. They're really paying attention. So you don't want to have an issue of volume and having to really think through and interpret what's being said through a strong accent or something like that. So speaking loud enough, not yelling at the person, but slowing down enough and enunciating the words really clearly. So when you're speaking, intentionally enunciating just a little slower, pause when you need to. Silence is okay. Use silence or strategic pause instead of the verbal fillers. I don't know if any of you ever do that, but like
Yep.
California style. We caught him, and of course, as we talked about pronunciation, I won't lead you through those. We talked about this a little bit, increasing the volume and the pitch, understanding the variations in rate, how fast you speak, and when and for which parts. Yes?
I've heard for pauses, there's something that I heard years ago that I always remember. A pause can be used in one of two ways. It's either to give everybody an opportunity to think about what was just said, or to get their attention for what you're about to say.
That's effective. Okay. Let's just repeat this one more time, because it was very, very a good point that I need to raise to my own students coming up. One more time.
So a pause is either to give people an opportunity to think about what was just said, or it's a prelude to getting them ready to hear what you're about to say.
That's some wisdom right there. It's very true. I think that's one of those, so write down. Yeah, kudos. Using your body to communicate, the nonverbals. We talked about that a little bit. Proxemics, facial expressions, your gestures. This is one of those cultural things as well, how close you get, and I know you all have studied that in conflict, how close you will get to individuals is a very cultural thing. So, for example, I believe if you go to India, they're very close, if you, certain social etiquettes, you kiss people on both cheeks or whatever if you know them, or so there's all these different things that have to do with communicating with that group and understanding the cultural nuances, including space, how close to get to somebody when you're talking to them. I've been talking to people before, and they're like right here, and you're like, whoa, are you trying to kiss me, or you have bad breath? You can smell their breath, they're probably too close. The facial expressions, One of the things that I've read a lot of, because I taught an entire class on nonverbal that I loved, is looking engaging. There's open and closed postures, and so if you are, when you're sitting down at a negotiation table or any sort of meeting, and you're leaning kind of towards them, and you look like you're listening, and kind of nod, you don't bob your head, you're not a bobblehead, but if you're nodding your head in agreement, although watch this, because nodding your head can mean agreement, or it can be I hear you. So be careful about that. But showing that open posture, like I'm listening to you, I'm engaged in what you're saying, I care about what you're saying, and those open postures are really great with that. But being open like this, it actually comes down to the fact we are inevitably kind of animals and by nature. When we're uncomfortable and not open, or we're protected, we're in a closed-in stance. We protect ourselves. And so what happens when you physically, whether you mean it or not, if you open up your body language, then people come across as, oh, they're really comfortable, they're open, they don't have something to hide or something like that. It looks like, okay, they don't feel like they have to protect themselves, and so I can engage with them. And it's a lot more comfortable and open dialogue, and you can be a lot more persuasive in getting a point across that way than if you hear kind of like this. And with setting you close off, which I got in trouble for one Thanksgiving. I did that. My mom, she was like, why aren't you talking and you're all closed off? I'm like, Mom, because everybody's arguing at the table. But you have to watch it. And even if you're a professor, you still do these things wrong. Okay. Last thing actually I want to bring up, let me see if I can't skip, is just that confidence. I really want to reinforce to you how confidence is huge. If you do not have a belief in yourself and what you are saying, then no one else is going to. If you don't feel and believe your words, how do you expect someone else to? And it doesn't matter what the field is, what presentation it is, what you're trying to say. You have to have that confidence. And if you believe it, or at least you try and believe it, act like you do, say it in your head, have that self-talk, the self-affirmations, that's going to help you. Because the second you have that self-doubt and you're in the middle of like presentation or whatever it is, and you're like, oh, I'm not sure about this, oh, I should have prepared this, oh, I didn't prepare my notes, I should have done this. Whew. You've taken away half of your effectiveness. So fake it till you make it, and be as confident as you can. And in order to get that confidence, practice, 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 because then you do actually know what you're saying. You know what you know, and hopefully ahead of time you will know what you don't know, so you can then know that too.
It's basic behavioral conditioning. If you practice confidently, then you'll perform confidently.
It's accurate. You are practicing with confidence. If you know it, and you may start out not showing it with confidence. By the time you practice it enough, you then have it. And it shows your language is improved, your nonverbals are improved, just overall confidence. You then have worked out all of your appeals. You then have all the data to support your evidence, the emotional, anything you need. And you can also figure out ahead of time and work into what you're saying, things that you need to do to get to people's motivations. So anytime you guys want somebody, I would love to come back and share any other topic you would like in a long list of things we have. Thank you all for coming. Yeah.
You guys have to ask questions.
Questions,
I've
please.
always been very nervous, and last week I had to do a presentation, and I just made sure that I was prepared, so, because she was trying to throw out beforehand a role play. It got me really nervous. I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna say, and I just don't throw out words like that. And so I did well because I just wrote down everything that I was gonna say, so I knew it was clear as it was written, and then I just practiced it, and it came out, so. And I paused, make sure I paused, and so those are really effective.
Those
So I
pauses.
feel better, yeah.
Just in writing that down. It'll
Writing
make
it
you feel
down.
better.
Thank you.
Once you start actually logging the things down, special occasion speeches, whether you're accepting an award or whatever it is that you have to get up and do that you were not expecting ahead of time, impromptu, you can get up there, but beforehand, have just in 2 seconds, just to write down a couple things. How am I going to introduce this? What are the couple points I need to make? How am I going to restate this, summarize, conclude, boom, and you're done. literally 5 minutes notice, you can do it. Really helps. Okay? Yes?
I just would like to share that I really appreciated the way you said the non-English speakers, because I'm not shy and I usually prepare, but I am terrified of out loud speaking for the accent. So I always get nervous. I'm not sure why. I would love to learn some techniques or something that could help out, and maybe pausing like she was sharing with us. That's a good one I'm doing right now.
My
But
friend,
it's
the
perfectly
Russian,
clear, everything was just enunciated. I actually love the accent.
Yeah.
But I mean, you have such a beautiful voice. But we understood every single word, and you did it a perfect pace. I'm not trying to judge, you know, like,
No,
but you
sure.
just did it at this perfect pace, and everything was enunciated, and it wasn't like completely monotone. It was perfect.
yeah,
So-
as long as you can be understood, then it actually, your accent adds to your uniqueness. It makes you special and memorable.
Intrigued, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I always find listening to people with accent, as long as I can understand them, I like it better.
Same here.
Especially British,
Love it.
Jamaican, anyone from the islands, just that, the way they sound English out on their
It's-
tongue.
We
French,
we remember
Italian.
very little of what we hear, and so anything that makes it different or unique helps us remember it. So if you have an interesting accent, you actually become more memorable as a speaker than somebody who speaks the way everybody else in the room speaks. Because people pay attention a little bit closer, because you're different.
That's cool. Thank you. Then
It is true.
that shall help me. I have a presentation in 2 weeks, so I'll remember those words of confidence.
Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you.
Prepare in advance.
Yes.
Record yourself.
Okay.
And then
Great.
practice, I forgot this part. Of course, you record yourself once you get confident. Then you present yourself to an audience. Maybe it's your cat or your dog, or maybe it's your family, or a neighbor, or a friend. And so you progress to a bigger audience.
One of the things I did when I first started speaking was I started practicing with my children. And children are just brutally honest.
Oh, they are.
And they would say, Mom, you're speaking too fast, or I can't understand you, or you need to slow it down, or can you explain that a little bit? And so finding, as she said, the friends and the family members that you can practice with would help. I speak for a living, that's what I do. So I just wanted this class because I wanted to just hear a refresher and, get some new perspectives on how to speak, and, I learned a lot, thank you. So I found it very informative.
Now, I'm curious, on anything that we did discuss, what was it that you learned that you didn't already know that was important to you as a takeaway?
I took quite a few notes. I used everything, basically. I used my pauses because I believe pauses can also appeal to the emotion of an individual or your audience. So I used that a lot. I would say, if I had to pick something,
Put her on the spot.
maybe the cultural
You guys ask me
differences.
questions, I'm like, hey.
Perhaps the cultural differences, because I'm not always cognizant of that when I'm speaking. My audience is typically the same constantly and all the time. So I'm not mindful of the cultural differences that is present in the room, So.
I speak regularly, about once a week, and I still get nervous, but some of the things I do is, I know that if I take space with my body, your self-assurance goes up. It's just scientifically proven. So I'm standing behind stage where nobody can see me, and I'm kind of taking space as much as I can. And another thing I always do,
Is that presence?
yeah, I mean, if you're like this, say, before an interview, kind of looking at your phone or whatever, that's the last thing you want to do. Another thing I do is I always drink water before, and I always have a good breakfast as well.
Yep. And they say bananas because it just gives you energy. It also settles your stomach. But he's right about the physical presence, and there's an entire field of nonverbal that pertains to that. But he's right. If you're speaking and and women tend to do this more than men, and I've seen it also, there's some cultural differences too, where in some cultures the men kind of close in a little bit more, but we have to work on that confidence. If your shoulders are coming in, then automatically it's that I'm nervous or I'm weak. Remember we talked about almost that back to an animal root. I mean, if you're like this, you're protecting yourself. If you're like this and your shoulders are broad, you're on top of that pack. You are confident and you believe in yourself, and that's how you're displaying yourself. Yes.
I think the point that you both made was just such a great point, and I work in the career development office here at the university, and it's something that I talk with students about often when they're going for interviews, projecting themselves. But a lot of times, like for me, my background is in communication, so I think of that all the time. But for someone who's never thought of that, sometimes like they might just be cold, so they're sitting like this. But for you as an interviewer, you might think they're not confident or they're nervous or whatever. So being aware that other people are approaching you, other people are like almost judging you based on what they're perceiving, even if it's not what you mean to tell them. So it's really interesting when people put that together and they say, oh yeah, I wasn't being nervous, or I wasn't being off-putting, I was just really cold. But how would we know that if we just see you standing there with your arms crossed?
And sometimes it's something as simple as a smile. So, for example, if you've ever been in a job interview with a panel or something like that, you're almost seeking somebody in the environment, whether it's public speaking or the panel kind of interview, you're almost looking around, trying to find that one person in the room that has just a gentle approach that cracks a smile or you get some sort of cue from. What's really challenging is when everybody has that straight face, solid, you can't get a clue.
You can grab those people though, like you mentioned it earlier, you just kind of walk up to somebody and you get
in there.
well, you get a personal connection, and then their expression changes. Like they become a support object for you in the audience. You can come back to them, and they're always going to be looking at you and smile at you back. So that you can actually create it for yourself.
You can, and that's an important role. And so if you're in an environment where nobody is cracking that smile, sometimes it's just you have to find a way to get in there. And people use jokes, but you have to be aware culturally and things like that, and not always appropriate. But finding a way to connect and get somebody to smile. And sometimes if you smile and you have a warm demeanor, then people will reciprocate. But so keeping those in mind.
Make eye contact, especially in a small room. Something you mentioned about like establishing your credentials and things that I've heard is you never come to a presentation without your written introduction so that you can be introduced the way you want to. And while you're being introduced, you're not doing something or looking at your phone, you're standing straight and tall with a smile on your face. And that's like, you get your credentials established exactly the way you want them established. And you start with a nice, friendly, confident
So introduce
thing.
you like that.
Yeah.
But that was an incredible point. I
Yes,
think
I
this
know.
is,
I should have done
I
it.
really don't care on this one, but I mean, like, you know, you guys are all students and we have some sense of all being on the same page and we're all playing for the same team, hopefully, you know. So it's a little different, but if you're especially going in front of an audience that has no idea who you are, you guys all knew that, okay, it would be a professor coming from, so there was already some sense of that, but especially when there isn't. And you have to, when you're doing some sort of public speaking or introducing somebody else, tell who you are too. If you're presenting the presenter, say, okay, you know, I'm so-and-so, I'm the president of whatever, or I'm a professor, because even that, I mean, you don't go on for long, but you just give a moment of, I've known so-and-so for this long, and I'm so impressed with their blah, blah, blah. So it's sometimes just showing, you know, yourself as a presenter, because usually they're in a position too, to kind of display that, and people don't always know who it is. Recently I went to a faculty thing where it was the dean that presented, or that I believe that he gave a quick overview on something, and it was just nice, and we all knew who it was, and that led some credibility to what was being said.
I have a question. What do you think contribute to the fear or the nervousness that someone would experience when it comes to speaking in public?
Good question. I feel like there's a lot of different responses and things that can cause the fear. Some people are nervous because they're afraid of failure. they're afraid of looking stupid or not intelligent, or that somebody won't listen to them. Their fear is that people won't engage, or they won't care about what's being said, so they're gonna put themselves out there and make themselves vulnerable, and they're nervous about how receptive the audience is going to be back. But there's a ton of different reasons that people have some sort of apprehension with public speaking. Those were just a few. Any more that come to mind?
One of the tricks I've heard to try and get over that for someone who's not real experienced, really the solution is experience. You practice and you get good. It doesn't matter anymore. But make a point, tell a story, because you always know your own personal stories. So if you want to say, motivation is really important, then you tell a personal story about how you were motivated to do something. And you'll never forget it because it's your own story. It's not something you wrote and scripted. It's just, this happened to me. And usually when you tell it, it comes across pretty well because you've told it before. It's an experience that you've talked about before.
You're confident.
Right.
Very true.
Yeah, I've done several, we had to give a presentation to all the chairs and the dean last Friday, and it's interesting, I was talking about, I've done it enough, as you know, as officers, we have to do a lot of that.
It's great
All
skill.
that, it is, and it's something that you don't realize you actually have until you are in an environment, but I did it, and I remember that knot in the stomach, but once I started talking, and once the questions, and there's also a couple of people that I always like to have around when I'm talking, and at Nova, Dr. Cooper always smiles at you. And that right there is just like,
And she's conflict resolution.
she is.
Great.
And she's just sitting there and she's smiling. And I was just like, and it's really what it was. And then I just went on, and then the dean is always, shaking his head, and it's a good point, Omar. And that's all he'll say for the first 15 minutes you say that. It's a good point. It's like, oh, another confidence boost. So, it's very interesting how the audience does play a part in your confidence. Like if you suck, no matter how, if you do 1,000 public speaking events and then you walk into an audience and they just don't like you, and your confidence is going to tank for that presentation. And I just find that very interesting how it's really, the audience does play a big part
They do.
in your confidence.
But sometimes working ahead of time. So if you come in a little early and you meet some people in the audience, if you can, before you even begin, so then you start having some conversations, you find out some information about them, you connect on a different level. So then when the presentation does start, you actually already have some faces and some relationships built, and they're more likely to ask questions and then to engage when you're actually doing the speaking, because you've already built some sense of rapport and a sense of comfort with that person. So they don't mind, they don't feel like they're putting themselves out there anymore because they kind of know you, and that is helpful.
Yeah, you can use callbacks. So either to something that was said publicly in the room or to something that was so if you're just looking for that support, you can make a callback to a conversation you had with somebody, you're gonna get a smile. It's gonna make you feel better, even if it was just a very personal comment. And that helps in the room too, because it's like, oh, they're connecting, they've got relationships in the room, and it helps build your confidence, and people start paying attention. What am I missing? What's going on? Kind of stuff.
If you can get in early enough, you set up your presentation ahead of time the best you can, so that you still have that time to meet with the audience. So try and set up your technology half an hour in advance, or maybe the day before, test it on the computer. One of the things that occurred, I worked at the FBI for a while, and one of the things that happened there, I'll never forget this, and I'm so proud of myself. This one moment I'm so proud of. Okay, I was supposed to do a presentation, and it was a room full of people, and I was supposed to be able to use the technology. Okay, first step of technology failed. I'd also managed to get, and it was on a classified system, so there are a number of different things you have to, and it was off-site, so it was just all these different things that had to be done. So it was a crazy process to begin with. I worked on it well in advance. I found out exactly what technology was going to be there. I found out exactly what I needed to do to transport the material. I found every little part of it out. Got there, computer wasn't working. Then they found something else that I could use, and then I couldn't access the network for some reason. But then I also had a backup. I did a backup to a backup to a backup to a backup. And so because I had done that, the last ditch scenario after all these different layers, nothing was working. And I had my presentation printed out and a few different copies, and I knew it so well that I didn't need the PowerPoint to begin with. So would it have been effective because I could have showed some data and some information? Sure. But I backed it up so many times that I didn't look like a complete idiot, and I was so happy.
It's a lot of work for one presentation.
No, but this was an important one, so, you know, depending on what it is, you're like, sorry, the technology is not working. This one I couldn't do. People had come from around the country to hear a presentation and a few different other ones, and it was like, okay, you're not gonna get a second chance. There is no, oh, you guys came all this way, sorry. So I knew the importance, and I backed it up, but so many levels, and before the presentation, I was like, really, I can't believe I did this. I kind of felt a little dorky, having backed it up this many times, and then I was literally on my knees thanking God that I had.
I think we have time for one more question. Out of the shirt. Shot two shirts. Anyone has to ask a question? Back row.
I have a question. Which college are you with?
DWAC, so it's Department of Writing and Communication.
She's our college.
So, same college.
Psychology?
She's in our college. The College of Arts, Management, Social Sciences, Department of Writing Program.
I'm in family fair.
Oh, see, we're all one great big family.
Yeah.
And then when you go into other colleges and departments and things like that, there's these same exact things apply. So this isn't something that is only for this one field. So no matter where you go or what your career is, still basic fundamentals will apply. And that pretty much for any speaking situation you end up in.
You just deal with the ethics differently in law versus business versus.
And like you said, conflict resolution and things like that, you have to know when you want to use those and when it's appropriate to intentionally use a fallacy. I mean, you have to be very, very careful and consider your ethics ahead of time. What is your ethical line? What is the perspective of an organization you're representing? Because they also have some say in what is allowed and what's not. Certainly at NOVA, for example, IRB. So we have all these ethics in play. We can't just go do research or have different kinds of dialogue without permission. So consider all of it.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.